I stand in deepest sadness today to acknowledge and adjourn in the memory of 6 young, innocent lives that were taken this weekend in my district in the little community of Isla Vista, which is adjacent to the University of California at Santa Barbara. I flew up here this morning from a community that is engulfed in sadness and grief. And I can attest to the fact that this past Saturday night, the school held a vigil where 5,000 of us walked in silence through the streets where this rampage took place, sharing grief and inexplicable sadness, incomprehension over what had just happened the night before in a place that is frequently the subject both of ire and envy, where a group of 20,000 young people come together on the weekends to share each other's company, to enjoy the beautiful Santa Barbara weather and environment, and to be young people who have hopes and aspirations, who are at the university because they are among our best and our brightest, and have dreams and hopes of being the leaders of our future. But this Friday night, a young man had other plans that he had meticulously shared on YouTube and Facebook and in blogs and creating manifestos, which detailed in great specificity the havoc, the mayhem that he was and did reap on this community because of his severe disaffection, his severe detachment, his severe mental illness. And so, having been able to legally acquire firearms, he set out to commit acts of mayhem in my community. And he did so. And he told us what he was going to do. And he started off by killing his roommates. He then went to one of our sororities, Alpha Pi Phi sorority, a place where I have been several times to talk to these young women about issues of concern to them. And he knocked on the door, as he said he was going to do, but in their wisdom, they did not open the door because he had with him firearms and enough ammunition to destroy each young woman in that sorority. Luckily, they did not open the door. But standing right next to that sorority were 3 young women standing at their sorority, the Tri Delta sorority. And he took out his firearm and he shot these 3 young women. And he killed 2 of them. The third, I am told, had her cell phone. And she called her mother to say, "Mom, I've been shot. I don't think I'm going to survive, but I want you to know I love you." She was the one lucky one. Her parents were the one lucky set of parents. He then proceeded to drive through the streets of Isla Vista, shooting randomly all over the place. And the only good part of this story is he was a terrible aim, because in the rounds of ammunition that he was able to get off, he only killed, I should say only, he killed a wonderful young man. He got out of his car and he went into a grocery store where this young man just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. And he stood there and shot and killed this young man and got back in his car and started running over students. And finally, the police were able to stop him. And he took out a gun, apparently, and shot himself. And when the sheriffs got there, they discovered sitting right next to the driver's seat were 40 magazines loaded with 10 shots each, 400 additional shots that he had not taken before he died. And so the community in shock has come together to try to make some sense of this, to try to understand what would compel someone to do this, to try to understand why this kind of thing could happen in this sleepy, fun, community, and I know that there are some of my colleagues who are graduates or who have children who have graduated, or members of our community here who have graduated from UCSB and proudly wear the monitor of Gaucho. And as I mentioned, we all came together because what can you say? The words are empty. Words don't express. Words can't explain. Words can't satisfy what you go through in the grief of losing a friend, of losing a child, of losing a brother or sister, or a community member, a loved one. And so I would like at this moment to ask us all to adjourn in a moment of silence for these young people, to pray for their families, to pray for the school, the community, for our state, for our nation, where we see these acts of senseless violence going on with far too great a regularity. I would like to read the names of these 6 victims. These were 6 extraordinarily wonderful, promising young people, all accomplished, full of hopes and dreams for their futures, and ask you to join me in a moment of silence after I read their names. And I would like to invite my colleagues who happen to be the representatives in whose districts one of these young people, we lost people from Chino Hills through Fremont, if they would like to say a few words as well. We lost Christopher Ross Michaels Martinez, 20 years old, of San Luis Obispo. Veronica Weiss, a freshman, 19, of Thousand Oaks. Catherine Brianne Cooper, 22, of Chino Hills, 3 weeks away from graduating. Chen Wang Hong, 20, of San Jose. George Chen, 19, of San Jose. And Wei-Han Wang of Fremont. Again, if we could take a moment of silence, and then if there are others who would like to say a few words, and then I would like to close, Madam President.
Thank you.
I think it's important that we all recognize that these are not numbers. These were young people whose lives mattered, that they had families, that they had friends, that they had hopes and aspirations. And I'm reminded this was our Memorial Day weekend, and many of us were back in our communities honoring those who gave their lives in service to this country, who made the ultimate sacrifice for our freedoms. And so I was asking myself, what are those freedoms? What are those freedoms that they fought for? And those were freedoms so that we could be without fear, freedoms so that we could be without harm, and freedoms so that we could be without want. And I look at what happened at UC Santa Barbara. I look at what has happened around the country, and I actually did some research on this and discovered that within the past 5 years, we've had over 15 mass shootings in this country that have killed 137 people and injured at least 147 more. But going back 30 years, we've had 40 shootings. We have lost several hundreds of people. But there is a pattern here. There is a pattern. They are usually disaffected men, ranging from the ages, believe it or not, of 11 to 14 to their mid-40s, who have had access to firearms and who have either been angry at some event in their lives or mentally ill. And so we do have a pattern here of things that we can address. And although now is the time for mourning, the time to grieve, to find strength in each other, and I know my constituents, I like to call them my kids, my students. They don't like to be called kids, by the way. Don't call them kids. They're young adults, but to many of us, they are our children. They are our kids. They are young people whose parents will never be able to dance at their weddings, who will never be able to hold their grandchildren in their arms, They're people who will never be able to find the cure for cancer or to brighten up the lives of others, because we as a nation have let this kind of behavior go on too long. And so as we look at these patterns, as Senator Steinberg has indicated, there is clearly an example of mental illness. We have got to take mental illness out of the closet. We have got to destigmatize it. It is real, it is here, it affects the lives of many of us in this room, either directly or indirectly. It affects our communities, either directly or indirectly, and we have to do more. We have to ask ourselves about the culture of violence we live in and the glorification that we see in movies and on video games. And one of my staff members said to me just yesterday, do you know that this young man's behavior parallels the game Grand Theft Auto, a video game that apparently is played by a lot of young people. And we've all heard, oh, no, video games aren't the problem. Well, maybe not. But maybe the problem is that along with these games of violence, we are not doing enough to teach our young people about compassion and empathy and human feelings. When I was little, there was a cartoon on called The Roadrunner, and he always got hit by a car or a boulder, but he always got back up again, beep, 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 whatever it was he said and did, and we all kind of laughed at it. Well, yes, there's always been some level of glorification of death, whether it's in comic books or cartoons or movies, but we have taught our young people that reality and that humanity and that civilization and community require that we behave respectfully and with respect and with compassion and empathy toward each other. We are losing that. And so I ask that we consider and reevaluate where we are on that issue as we go forward, how we address those problems, whether it's through education or through parents or families. How do we make ourselves more sympathetic and empathetic and recognize that a bullet can kill, that after you're shot, you may not get up again? We need to teach this at the very earliest of ages. We need to stop glorifying violence. We need to stop allowing the kind of unspeakable hatred and attitudes towards women that were publicly acknowledged by this young man. The misogyny, the extremism of the notion that he was going to go out and kill all these blonde women who refused to give him the love that he thought he was entitled to. And we also, finally, need to address the issue of guns by putting these weapons in the hands of people who are either mentally ill or so angry that they can't control themselves, that they can go out and take the lives of others. And as the father, Mr. Chris Michael Martinez's father, said in an extraordinarily gut-wrenching, heart-wrenching statement after learning of the death of his son. He said, Chris died because of craven, irresponsible politicians and the NRA. They talk about gun rights. What about Chris's right to live? When will all this insanity stop? When will enough people say, stop this madness? We don't have to live like this. Too many have died. We should say to ourselves, not one more. And so as we go forward, I say to Mr. Martinez and to the parents of each of those young people who died, that we have got to do better. We are in a position to do just that. As the policymakers, as the leaders of the state, we are looked to by our communities to keep us safe, to keep us from fear, to keep us from harm. It is time for us to recommit to a public policy conversation and action. It is the least we can do for these young people and the hundreds of others who have died senselessly and needlessly in the past. Thank you for this moment of silence.